So thank you everybody for joining us today to this webinar. I'm Howard Osgaard, Director of Botanical Solutions at Species 360, and together with me we have Jamie as well, who's joining us.
Hello.
Yeah, and we have set aside 45 minutes to talk about what we've titled A New Era for Mapping Plants. It's a bit of an ambitious title maybe, and let's see if we manage to reach that level of euphoria. We'll see. We're going to talk about, I'm going to start off also talking a bit about the history of mapping and GIS, because I felt it sort of suitable in sort of putting things into context. So for some of you probably know all this already, maybe all of you, but if that's the case, then we'll be brief anyway. And then we're going to look a bit about what the challenges we face with mapping today. And then, so there will be quite a lot of demos at the end. And then, as always, feel free to ask questions as we progress through the presentation. And we had this session this morning. There was a lot of questions and discussions, and I'm sure there will be something today as well. Jamie and I will look after the Q&A, or if you feel like raising the hand, or if you just feel like unmuting, that's fine as well. Okay, so quickly a bit about us as well, for those who may not know us very well, or those who watch the recording. Looking at plant records, we know that many people who aspire to have good, reliable records find it hard to achieve that kind of level of, what should I say, nirvana, because of the time you need to spend to actually achieve good plant records. So that's what, having talked to gardens over 2 decades, time seems to be the biggest constraint for many people. So that's one of the primary drivers for us with Hortis, to make plant record keeping efficient as it can be. And that's sort of part of the story today as well, with the changes we are now introducing in the mapping. And the second part is accuracy. How can you if you don't have accurate records, you can't rely on them. So, and the last point here is always available. And that's one of the things we also tried to think about when we started with Hortis. We want to make people have access to their records when they need it. So Hortis, as many of you know, runs on any kind of device you have, smartphone, no installation required, smartphone, tablet, or desktop. So you just need some internet. I also want to highlight that what helps with our work as well is that by removing friction, by helping people to be more efficient and accurate, we hopefully want to see this graph that you see in front of us changing over time. Over 80% of botanic gardens around the world do not have access to professional systems. And that is a big problem or a concern with regards to plant conservation, because successful plant conservation is a coordinated effort. And if we don't have data of those 80%, we do not really know what 80% of botanic gardens have in their collections. So that it's a huge challenge. So working together with BGCI, so to see if we can change that graph and increase the likelihood of us to reduce the impact that climate change has on plant extinction, etc. I just want to mention this briefly. Like some of you seen this before. The way we think about this is like the sort of healthy plant records. What is that? Well, we see that as like 4 pillars. And if you get those right, you can actually start to use your records in a different manner. You can imagine if you have a spreadsheet and you're not sure about how if they actually represent what is in your garden or in your arboretum or whatever. So having the right scientific names is very important, especially from a conservation perspective, or in other ways. If you misspell the name, you might not realize that you have a plant that is threatened in the wild, for example. Plant identification is important, being able to track your uncertainty there, provenance, where the plant came from, the plant material came from, important, and the inventory gap. That means the difference between what you have in your data set or in your spreadsheet or whatever. How does that relate to what's actually growing outside in the garden? And that gap, if that's very big, then you start to get unreliable data again, and you can't really use your data for much more beyond just as a historic archive. So that's what we're all about, trying to help you to get to that wonderful state of healthy plant records, so you and your team and your institution can be more impactful in everything you do. And then now just going to quick brief history of mapping. I thought it was funny to try to dig into this particular story a bit. And I think humans, it's quite obvious that humans have been curious about mapping since the beginning of time. It looks like a 6th century BCE. Somebody wrote a map, but we know all the cartographers from Columbus and so forth. So mapping is sort of integral part of many people's lives. And if you think about our modern humans now, we can't even go to the grocery store without Google Maps helping us to find it. So progress and mapping plays an important part to our lives. The first software, like apparently, was all made in the 60s, and it looks a bit snazzier today. But you could see people already at that point with really primitive sort of platforms were able to come up with something that might have been a bit useful. I'm not sure exactly what these maps are trying to illustrate, but and then first map on the web, that was in the 93, and you can see that also was quite a sort of a rugged experience. But people were keen to make maps useful on the computers as early as that. And then we know. I think from my perspective, my background as a software engineer, the introduction of Google Maps really changed the landscape dramatically. It made sort of maps more accessible to a much broader audience. And interesting to note here is that the way first released, it was a useless project according to themselves. So it sort of guess it gives you an idea about how a perception, first time impression actually versus the outcome, what that looks like. Okay, so now one thing to note here. So many of you probably use these maps for all kinds of things, and they are super helpful, but they lack, especially for botanic gardens. If you have an arboretum, I think you might be often can be okay, but if you have herbaceous plants and other sort of the detail, because of basically the scalability of web maps, they don't have the resources to give everybody on the planet very detailed maps. So that's one challenge we have now if you look at how maps can be used in botanic gardens. And the second part is, so the way to alleviate that is, of course, to get hold of some GIS tools. Here's an example of ArcGIS, the ArcMap, the older version. The new one looks a bit cooler, but I just felt it was illustrative to show that it's quite a thing to learn. It's a big product. It's a fantastic product in terms of what it is able to what you can achieve with it, but it's not something you can just pick up and run with and make some great maps from day one. So that is the solution today if you want to have something somewhat more detailed than what these maps you get directly from Google, being an OpenStreetMap, etc. That's one challenge. The second thing is then, of course, you have all these plants, and if you want to have a useful map, you want to find all the plants on the map. And then that means that you need to map all the plants. So that's a big effort especially for some of you who, if you have a large collection, and at some point you might be spending so much time that the plants are dead before you actually get to mapping them, especially if you have lots of annuals and perennials. So that's one of the challenges that we want to look at here. So basically, this is what this webinar is about. How do we deal with sort of helping you so you don't have to map absolutely everything, and B, helping you so you can actually have some more detailed maps without having to learn some really complicated tools or spend money on expensive licenses to do so. So the idea is basically with this latest update, more useful maps with less friction. And when we publish this this webinar, we expected or hope to have this new release out to you, and it will be shipped before the end of the week. It was supposed to go today. We're just doing some final tweaks, so I'll be showing you from the workbench, as it were, some details. So bear with me, so let's go into some demos here. So you probably noticed that you probably recognize this dashboard, that you get when you log into Hortis. I'm not going to spend, if some of you are completely new to Hortis, we're not going to do much in terms of explaining details, so bear with us, and then maybe there's some other videos that are more useful for that. But the story here is that you get in, you get the dashboard, and you have the traditional aspects here on the left, where you can get a list of your collection. I'm going to filter that away, and then you can see all your collection. This is quite a small data set, sample data set for you here. And this is where, normally these type of systems would be the place where you operate. You sort of, you go here, you filter, you sort. If I want to give all my sort of gladiolus or something, I can type glad, and I get those listed very quickly, nice, and I can do something with them. I can update 3 of them or do whatever. So what we wanted to achieve, so here we got the materials, we got the accessions and tags up here. What we want to achieve is to say that you should be able to do the similar thing in the map. And that I think already is somewhat different from what's been done in the past. And we think because it's, so I could do here, look for the gladiolus here as well. And then you see there's only 1 or 2 that is mapped. But then this is part of the story of how we're going to improve this to show that plants that aren't mapped but are in a bed will actually come up here as well in the future. So what you can see here now, that for those who are observant, is that we have now introduced two tabs here on the top. So you can either look at your plants or your beds, your locations, and this particular garden has all these beds, but you see that there's no beds recorded yet. So what I'm going to do first of all here is to show you how you can actually draw these bed areas. So I'm going to start here with this particular bed here, or area. And what you see here now when I click on that bed, I'm going back again, so maybe went a bit fast. When I click on the bed, I get all the plants in that bed straight listed. So that's already quite a nice little feature. So you can sort of look at plants in the bed. And you can see here, this one isn't mapped, but all the others seems to be mapped. So that's also quite handy as a capability. But before I go on, I'm going to actually record where this bed is on the map by saying here, clicking Add Polygon, and then it will zoom in to the area we're working on, and then it will, to help you, it will hide the plants for this particular when I'm in this position, and then I can actually just click in the corner and then start drawing my lovely bed. So I'm going to just do a very simple one here now. I'm not trying to be very accurate, but what's really interesting here now is that this level of detail is where now we don't show scale here, but we can create probably a foot wide coffee table to put 3 pots on as a bed if you wanted to. So that's quite nice. So I'm going to confirm that. And now we see that we have 1 bed here. Really nice. I'm just going to do the tropics as well. So which I know is by the next point. And you see here, we also have another few plants here, 26 of them. And then I'm just going to click here on the corner, click here. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of the rest of this drawing polygons. I know you have seen. Have you seen it once? You've seen it before. So I'll just double click, and then I confirm, and then that's done. And then I'm gonna show you that you can actually do something more fun as well. If I do this last one, subtropics, I could also say that I want to actually show the pathway leading in between inside this little this greenhouse. So now I got the first part, and I confirm that. But then I can then say, oh, I clicked a bit quickly here. So that was subtropics. So I can actually update polygon. No, I'm not going to do that. Sorry. Cancel. Thank you. I'm going to. Oh, interesting. Where do I? If I do, oh, that's interesting. I think we have a little bit of a. Oh no, I can click here. My bad. So if I start here now, I should be able to start a new polygon. So we can actually have multiple polygons. It's quite hard to actually stretch. So I'm gonna just make this simpler on myself now. And now I can show you another thing. If you want to edit it more, if I click it again, you see these little small dots here. I can then drag hold of those. So you can keep on refining. If I want better curves here, I could keep on refining. I can zoom in and sort of make it nicer as I go along. So this is a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon. So that it's an ugly. So, but I just want to show you that there's quite a lot of, oops, there we go. We are still working on early beta here, but it did save it almost, yeah. Oh, that's good. So you have the option then. So if I now go out here again now, and you will then also notice that there is a new option to switch on and off locations. So I can hide those locations if you want here. And those locations will obviously pop up on other types of maps. So that's quite helpful as well. And then when you have the map like this, you can always just click on the bed, and then you get all the plants in that bed. So now suddenly the map has a dual purpose, where you can click on individual plants and look at the individual plants, or you can click on a bed and then you get all the beds. So you can imagine here that if you start drawing up all your beds, you could sort of have a much more of an engaging map already by that. And what I want to do as well now to show you that you could then start by drawing the beds and not mapping any plants. And then when you click on the bed, you can say, I'm going to see where is this one isn't mapped. So I can say, I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to map that one. When he's in a completely different place. So he's actually here, and now it's in its correct position. So you can see the workflow here can be super efficient. And yeah, I think I've sort of mentioned as much as I can think of in terms of how this behaves. What we see here is there's a lot of scope to completely or add more capabilities as we go here. I can imagine people would like to know the area size, for example, how much fertilizer do I need for this particular bed or whatever. This will we're going to ship this and then keep on adding more capabilities as we go. I was trying to think if there's anything else. So one thing that we also see as a natural evolution here is if you go back to the map itself, that you will, if I now search for my gladiolus again, you would like to see them popping up with a number that you got 2 once in this bed, for example. That's something we don't have yet, but there's a lot of great cool stuff we can add to this as we progress. And the last thing, if not least, so one thing I also didn't mention here is that you can, when you look at the location, somebody in the previous session asked, how do you manage your locations? You can manage your locations down here in the settings, but now with this one, you can actually go in here. If I look at these container plants, I can go in and change the name of the location directly here. And I can add new locations. If I go back to the list, I can add new locations here as well, just to create a new one and build up plan your whole bed from the map. Going back to what I said initially, that we would like you to, if you want to, be in the map and manage your collection as efficiently as you can. And one thing I would say here as well, for those who are a bit techy, is that Hortis, as far as I know, is the only plant record system that has a fully functional geospatial database at the back end. So there's a lot of great capabilities we can bring to you in the long term. So when I said we know the size of this, we have the database capability to ask what is the size of that and how many inches or centimeters is it between these two, et cetera. So, but we'll eventually, we're not going to compete with ArcGIS or quantum GIS or anything like that. We just want people who manage plant collections to be more efficient and do what they find is important in relation to manage their collections. So there will be a point here where we'll say maybe that's out of scope. So some of you who have invested in ArcGIS and Esri would probably still use that for more sort of, what shall I say, advanced things that we may not want to or find useful enough for the whole community. We'll see. Okay, I think I will go back to this map and then see if there are any questions so far. There's something in the chat I can see. Slivers, an issue. I'm not sure exactly what slivers are. So you're on mute, Shari, sorry.
Slivers are those areas between the polygons.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, like this one here. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I noticed so much as I can't see. I mean, it is an issue in how steady your hand is when you draw them. We haven't. If I update this polygon, and then so when you update, you have to click it once, and then you sort of you activate those dots, and then now I should be able to just pull. Now I got the cross mark. I can then, of course, zoom in as much as I can, so I can really get it all the way nudged up. But I know what you mean. I think with ArcGIS and Esri, and where these kind of so now let me fix that one. Go back and do this one. Oops. So is it an issue? I can't say other than that it might be tricky sometimes to get it right. That's the only thing I can say. But I know that ArcGIS have tools like nudging and making things, smoothing curves, and there will be a place where we will say stop. And I think to the question from Tom here, it's sort of can you import polygons? And I think that's probably where we're more likely to move quicker than slower, so that those who have already made those beds should be able to import them somehow. And then, of course, you can then use more powerful editing tools to prepare it than what we might want to delve into. So we'll see. But I think I managed to do quite a nice job here, if I may say so myself. Yeah. Yeah. Any other? But yeah, the import question was something that was asked before as well. And the export, I mean, at this point, you could export your whole collection, and lat long is part of it. We haven't put any export capabilities yet on the polygons or on the beds, but I see that as also a natural kind of progression, if you like. We don't want people to sit and duplicate information all over the place. Yeah. the idea, you see that maybe the color scheme is a bit rough, so we might sort of improve that a bit, sort of the contrast and things. And those who have switched to the other motivator is, of course, also for those of you who have shared your collection online with the public. We'll expect that this will also trickle out into that platform, so that you can then start sharing plant material that isn't mapped, but you still feel is relevant for your visitors. That's also on the roadmap. So here's a question from Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. So you have many spaces to map that are vertical. Wonderful question. Yeah. Okay, so we did look at this initially, and that's really great. So anyway, there's a similar challenge with I was going to say epiphytes, but epiphytes, that or plants that grow on other plants, parasites and others, that is quite hard to map because they are literally on another plant. So and you have greenhouses with multiple floors, so we don't have a solution for that yet. But one thing we're exploring, I mean, Hortis is technically there is a kind of a 3D map technically potential in the platform, but we might look at having an ability to say that beds are on different levels on top of each other or something like that. We need to explore that a bit more, Lauren. I think it's tricky, but yeah, I think we'll leave it. I know that this is something that a lot of gardens have at least epiphytes, and some with multi-story greenhouses, the same challenge. So we understand the problem, at least in that what people want to achieve. So defining the points on the bed using lat-long readings. I think that's a great question, Paul. I think in general, if we get into export-import, I think that would be the route then, that you use some sort of GPS tracker to line up a polygon and then import that result. But at this point, no. I mean, you could do is to use this particular feature here, and when you're on smartphone, you can actually see where you are. But we don't have a like track me, trace me, and create a polygon. That might be something we add in the future. Bear in mind that especially the standard sort of run-of-the-mill smartphone will not have a very precise GPS receiver, and it's very affected by canopy in botanic gardens. You may not feel that when you're driving on the motorway, because there's no trees in the way from the satellites. But when you're in the garden, your phone will often send you off quite a big distance away from where you actually are. So you might need some really expensive equipment. What we like to say here as well, when you draw these beds, is that because most of us don't use this map for other than horticultural or curatorial needs. So the need for precision is less stringent. So that means that you can, the key point is you want to find the plants. For those of you who map the plants and use those for more important things like construction, not more important things, other things I should say, plants are important, for decisions on construction work, then you need precision. Then you need to sort of spend more time on getting exactly the things you need. But if you look at a satellite map, for example, you will have the satellite map itself, depending where you're on the planet, might in itself be somewhat off. So it's a bit of a complicated story, this whole thing about getting accuracy. But being able to find the maps plants is the first thing. And then you can use big trees and houses as reference point to build up a decent map to find and locate the plants. So to that question, lat-long, not so much. And then, yeah, Keith mentioned here with the sliver issue. Yeah, that's a sort of a snap to capability that you see in ArcGIS, for example. It's yeah, we'll keep on investigating and see what the feedback is when this is live, and look forward to see some wonderful maps being shared here. So when you draw, here's some question. Yeah, when you draw the polygon on top of the existing plant layer, do each of those plants contained within the new polygon get updated to include this polygon into a field? That's a wonderful question, and that's something I was planning to mention, which I forgot, and that is, at this point in time, there's no relationship between the actual plant points and the polygons themselves. And that's a natural progression here, that if I move this plant into this bed, one would naturally assume that we have now said that this plant is moved into this bed, but that's not the case at this point in Hortis. We will explore that so that you can be even more efficient. And the other part is, of course, to say you have placed the plant in this bed polygon, but it's actually recorded to be in a different bed. So we don't. There's no logic to deal with that yet. But there, we appreciate that that's something that you might expect to see in the future. And yeah, the other thing somebody mentioned earlier as well is to be able to use basically the same drawing feature, but then there's a filtering mechanism. You want to, like you have a checklist in the list to say, I want to work on those particular plants. You might want to say, these particular plants, I want to create a list for or something. So that's also something we've noted. Okay, so here's a question from Monique here. Could layer within maps help define vertical plantings? Yes, that's thank you, Monique. That's what we were talking about. I didn't explain that very clearly when the question came up here from Lauren, that looking at basically thinking of the whole garden as most gardens have only one layer because they don't have vertical planting. But if you add one or two more layers for those plants that are higher than the others. So that's the alternative to going all the way into 3D mapping, which I think the layering story is probably much easier to comprehend than starting to record height coordinates as well. So, yeah. Great. I was seeing if there are any other questions. I know we steamed along with a bit of maybe a bit too fast, but obviously there might be some other questions not necessarily related to mapping that some of you might have regarding the use of Hortis, and we're happy to obviously discuss that as well. So if you have any, I want to reiterate what some people mentioned. The one thing that I think is worth mentioning when it comes to the beds, which is really quite helpful with Hortis, is that with Hortis we have this idea that you don't delete anything, you archive it. So when if I wanted to delete this particular record, I actually put it in the archive, and you can undelete it, so you can rescue it out of it. So nothing gets wasted. And this goes for beds as well. And what's interesting is that I think most gardens over time will change their bed layout. So those beds will typically in many of these type of systems be hanging around, being noised in the list of beds that are no longer there. But in Hortis, as soon as the plants in that bed is recorded as absent, you can then delete the bed, but the historic data is there. So you can then keep a very current bed list that is clean and nice, and then not having to worry about all those historic data will be there. So and there was a question or an idea that somebody talked about here. We should have the ability to run like a time machine here to see how you've planted all your plants in this last year. So we'll see if we get that coming as well. So here's a question about the dashboard. Does the dashboard now reflect the number of beds developed? There's no stats on beds as such here yet. Whether that's something that people might want, I'm not sure. But this dashboard, we will, like everything else, just these questions are super helpful for us. We as many of you have probably noticed, we'll listen and keep on improving and helping you. And the beautiful thing here is that we can roll out an update to all of you in less than 10 minutes. And that happens on a quite a regular basis, as those who use Hortis have experienced, and that's really great. So oh yeah, that's a fun. Thank you for that question, Tom. Drawing sort of beds with holes in it. I think I think we haven't thought about that yet, but I know I seem to remember that that's a particular sort of capability you have in ArcGIS as well, to sort of the best way I could say to do that is to, let's say we have, here's the a bit of a pond here. So yeah, you would probably have to just draw 2 half moons and then make it into a visual looking like one circle with a hole in it, for now at least. But yeah, that is not necessarily something we've looked at yet. Yeah, so here's from Joe Linya. Because of recent garden constructions on sidewalks, the background map does not match the new garden beds. Is the way to get an updated background map? Oh, that's great. So then I will say, first of all of you, you have your default map will be from OpenStreetMap, and that is something you can actually go and update yourself, and it will take quite a few weeks. Worst case scenario, apparently 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So there's on the support portal, you will see an article about how you can update your own OpenStreetMap, and I will really recommend to have a go at that. So that will then at least fix the base map, and then for the satellite, it's a bit more complicated, because then you have to have either try to become the CEO of Google or something, or try to make phone calls. And there's a very few people who have control over when these flights go over. So then I think the next step is to go and look at getting your own drone map, which is also maybe quite a, in the great scheme of things, a cost-effective way to get a map. Yeah, thank you, Jamie. So there's a link to the article on how you can update your map on OpenStreetMap. And there's also an interesting link to another article about how to. You see here, I've put Google here, but you can put in how you could host or prepare your own maps for hosting and stick it into Hortis as well. There's another article on that. Okay. And I'm trying to see if there's any other questions or hands raised. So going back to the initial idea around this is now that hopefully this map is not really that well a good representation, because we actually have some polygons or loaded from another map server. This is like used for illustration as well. But if you look at the Google map, you see now with these new layers, it's sort of a somewhat more functional maybe. And then so the idea is that you could create some more useful maps for you, and then not having to map all the plants. So I'm gonna switch off then. Here you can also see, if I click this one, I will see where I am on the map, which I'm not in Amsterdam at the moment, so I'm not going to try that. It will send me away. Yeah, we are 4 minutes away from the end of the webinar, but I'm happy to take any more questions. If not, we could go home early. I was just checking here to see if there's anything. I don't know if Jamie, if there's anything you think I should have added or talked about.
No, the only so 2 things that I was going to mention is that if you did, let's say 2 beds were absorbed into one, then you could go to the list and actually see all of the plants that are in a certain location, and then tick them all, and then it reattribute them to another bed. Would just be an easier way to bulk it instead of having to do them each individually, if that makes sense. And then the only other thing to mention is that we will follow up with everyone. So if you do have any questions that perhaps you didn't want to ask here, or you think of later on, then you can always ask us separately.
Yeah. We can. I mean, what we should do is just show you, for those who haven't, we have a demo website of the public site. So this particular garden here, you can no, that's the wrong. Sorry. Give me a sort of oops. Just give me a second. I'm just going to bring up. So for those of you who haven't tried out the, we're going to send that into the link as well. Here is a version of the public site, which I'm going to show you here on the phone, on here. So this is the visitation that everybody could look at, and you can see here that getting those beds drawn in here might be quite nice, and then here the visitors will then be able to see details about its. And here is another example of how we trying to make life friction free for you. This particular garden haven't written anything about this, so we then provide details from Wikipedia instead. So you have some sort of what shall I say, interpretation that without having to do much effort. So with that whole story, you basically need to just record what kind of plants you have and map them, either by bed or by exact location. And then when you then here, I'm not sure if this is not, if I bring up one of these, I can then, this is now made public. So you can basically make individual plants public, and then they will be available here to the visitors. So have a go with that link if you want to try this particular feature. And what is really great, I find, is the way it works on smartphones. Here's on an iPad, but if I'm just going to change it for you so you can see on this one, for example, it's really a really nice, smooth experience to then explore the garden and look at different plants. So that's sort of, again, going back to the initial story about accurate records. If you don't have accurate records, you may not want to share it with visitors. But now, by having those data up to date, you can feel more comfortable by sharing it, and people will learn more, and you may not even bother to put up signs on the plants even because you have it here on your smartphone. So that's the one you saw earlier where you can then drag up and stuff. So okay, I think see if there's any. I don't have even a second. I have a last slide here. So I found a wonderful map from the 15th century of the Netherlands. But we will send a link to you with the recording when that's out. And for that, I will thank you for joining us today. And any questions and comments, send them to us. If you want, the easiest way to get in touch is actually go to the support portal. But a lot of you have our emails. But if you use support@hortis.com, you will be sure that some of us will be able to respond. So with that said, I will say thank you so much for joining today, and happy mapping.